She thought she had found a way out, a man with wealth, power, and promises too tempting to resist. But in Atlanta's elite circles, love isn't love, it's leverage. And when she dared to break free, she didn't just risk losing his money, she risked losing her life. This is the story of a sugar daddy, a son, and a mistress caught in a deadly obsession. A love triangle where only two would make it out alive. Welcome to Vic's Crime Stories. We uncover the chilling case of a sugar daddy's murder. Atlanta is a city that never sleeps, its skyline glittering, its streets humming with ambition. But on one cold morning, that hum was interrupted. A jogger, just out for his routine run, veered off the path near Piedmont Park, and stopped. What he saw made his breath hitch, his pulse stutter. A woman. Motionless. Her dress stained with dirt, her once perfectly styled hair tangled like a forgotten doll's. The early morning fog curled around her like a cruel embrace. She wasn't asleep. She wasn't unconscious. She was gone. The police arrived within minutes, their radios crackling, their faces tight with the knowledge that this wasn't just another night gone wrong. This was deliberate. Cold. Personal. And soon, a name would surface. A name tied to wealth, power, and secrets too dangerous to be spoken aloud. Martha Jennings. 23 years old. An aspiring fashion designer with big dreams and an even bigger secret. A secret that had led her straight into the arms of Atlanta's most powerful real estate mogul, Kelvin Blackstone. And now, straight to her grave. Kelvin Blackstone. 52 years old. A man whose empire stretched across Atlanta like an iron grip. A devoted husband to his elegant wife, Catherine. A father to his brilliant son, Matthew. A man who had everything, except control over one thing. Her. Martha entered his world young, hopeful, and desperate. Desperate for stability. Desperate for a way out of the relentless cycle of struggle. Kelvin? He offered her a gilded cage, disguised as opportunity. A penthouse apartment, designer dresses, weekends in Miami. He made her feel special. Made her believe she was different from all the others before her. That he wasn't just another man buying time, affection, and obedience. And for a while, Martha played her part. She smiled at the right moments. Laughed at his jokes. Let him dress her, parade her, possess her. Until the day she met someone else. Someone young. Someone kind. Someone who didn't see her as a purchase, but as a person. Matthew Blackstone. Kelvin's only son. The irony? Neither of them knew who the other was when they met. A spilled coffee. A nervous apology. A connection that felt easy, effortless. What started as a chance encounter became late-night calls, stolen moments, whispered confessions. For the first time, Martha saw a future beyond expensive gifts and whispered ultimatums. A future that belonged to her, not to a man who treated love like a business transaction. And then, the moment of revelation. The gala. The evening where Atlanta's elite gathered under chandeliers, sipping champagne, exchanging polite lies. Matthew, smiling, unaware. Martha, breathless, stunned. And Kelvin? Oh, Kelvin knew. The moment his eyes landed on them, standing too close, looking too comfortable, he knew. And suddenly, the room was too small. The music too loud. The betrayal, too sharp. The confrontation didn't come in public. No, that wasn't Kelvin's style. It came later, behind closed doors, where his voice could be calm, measured, terrifying. "You think you can walk away from me, Martha?" he had said, his fingers grazing the rim of his whiskey glass. "You think my son will protect you?" He didn't need to yell. He didn't need to threaten. The message was clear. She had a choice, leave Matthew, or lose everything. But love, real love, makes fools of even the smartest people. And so, Martha made a decision. A reckless, desperate decision. She married Matthew. Believing, naively, that a wedding ring could serve as a shield. That the vows they whispered to each other could silence the storm brewing behind Kelvin's eyes. She was wrong. The last time anyone saw Martha Jennings alive, she was leaving the Blackstone estate. Her face pale, her hands shaking. What was said inside that house, what promises were made or broken, we may never truly know. But what we do know, is that hours later, her body was found in Piedmont Park. And Kelvin? Kelvin Blackstone sat in a dimly lit police station, adjusting his cufflinks, his lips curling into something that almost looked like amusement. "You knew Martha Jennings, Mr. Blackstone?" the detective had asked. Kelvin exhaled, a slow, deliberate chuckle escaping his lips. And then, he spoke. "Knew?" he repeated, tilting his head ever so slightly. Detective, she was like family. But some families don't protect you. Some families bury you. Martha Jennings was 23 years old, full of talent, full of dreams, and drowning in reality. A reality that came in the form of student loan statements piling up on her tiny kitchen table, the rent notices slipped under her door like silent warnings, the endless shifts at the boutique where she folded designer dresses she could never afford. She had a vision, a future draped in silk and stitched with success, but dreams didn't pay bills, and talent didn't erase debt. She was running out of time. Out of options. Then came the invitation. A charity gala, the kind she had only seen in magazines. A friend pulled strings, secured a last-minute +1, and suddenly, Martha found herself standing beneath a chandelier worth more than her entire existence, clutching a champagne flute she couldn't pronounce, wearing a dress that wasn't hers. The room was golden, golden chandeliers, golden laughter, golden people who lived golden lives. And among them, there he was. Kelvin Blackstone. The kind of rich that didn't need to be announced. It was in the way he stood, the way people leaned in when he spoke. He was watching her before she even noticed, his gaze steady, assessing. When he finally approached, his voice was smooth, practiced, the kind that wrapped around a room and made it his. They spoke of nothing, weather, art, things that held no weight. But his eyes never left her, and Martha, for the first time that night, forgot about her debt, her struggle, the heaviness in her chest that had followed her for months. By the time the evening ended, her best friend pulled her aside, fingers tight around her wrist. "Be careful with him," she whispered. "Kelvin Blackstone isn't just rich, he owns people." But Martha only laughed. He had only bought her a drink, after all. What harm could there be in that? The next week, a package arrived at her doorstep. Inside, a dress. The same one she had admired at the boutique, the one she had traced with her fingertips before reluctantly placing it back on the rack. No note, no sender's name, but she knew. She told herself it was just a gift. Just kindness. Then came the dinner invitations. The private flights. The weekends at penthouses where the walls were lined with books Martha had only read about in school. Kelvin had a way of making her feel as if she belonged there, as if she were meant for this life. And perhaps, for a moment, she believed it. But beneath the extravagance, there were rules. It started small. A comment on a dress, something more fitted, something in red. A suggestion on her hair, her shoes, her company. "You look beautiful," he would say, but then add, "I think I prefer it when you wear your hair down." His voice was always warm, always laced with admiration, but the requests were not really requests at all. One evening, she was late, only by 10 minutes. But when she arrived, he was already there, seated at the candlelit table, fingers tapping against his glass. He said nothing at first, just watched as she hurried in, breathless from rushing. Then, with a slow smile, he poured her a drink. "You'll find I'm protective of what's mine." The words sent a chill down her spine, though she wasn't sure why. His world was a velvet prison, and she was learning, slowly, how the bars were built. The lavish gifts, the whispered compliments, they were not random. They were placements in a game she hadn't realized she was playing. And there were moments, brief but undeniable, where she could feel the walls closing in. A question about where she had been. A hand that lingered just a second too long on her wrist. The locked drawer in his study that she was never to touch. Martha told herself it was nothing. Just his way. Just a man used to control, to order. And hadn't he been good to her? Hadn't he given her everything? A home with windows that stretched to the sky, a life she had only ever dreamed of? It was a small price, she told herself. A fair trade. She never saw the cage until the door had already closed. It began with something small. A moment so insignificant that, had she walked a little faster or turned a little slower, it might never have happened at all. Martha had been rushing, half distracted, her mind cluttered with 1,000 things, when her coffee slipped from her fingers, colliding with someone's chest in a warm, spreading stain. She gasped, reaching instinctively for napkins, mumbling apologies before she even saw who she had crashed into. Then she looked up. The man in front of her was laughing. Not the forced, polite chuckle of someone restraining irritation, but a real laugh, deep, unbothered, amused by the whole mess. His shirt, once pristine, was now ruined, but he waved off her frantic apologies with an easy shrug. "Guess I needed a reason to stop wearing white," he said, grinning as he helped gather the fallen cup. There was something different about him. Something lighter, something uncalculated. He wasn't sizing her up or placing her in some unspoken hierarchy. He was just there, in the moment, as if nothing else mattered. And for the first time in a long time, Martha felt that, too. She had no idea who he was. Their conversation stretched longer than it should have, slipping past the usual pleasantries into something more. She learned his name, Matthew. He learned hers. And before they parted, he touched her wrist, just lightly, and said, "You owe me a coffee." The words lingered. The invitation sat between them, unspoken but understood. Later, when she told herself she should let it go, that her world had no space for reckless, chance meetings with strangers, her phone lit up with a message. A location. A time. 3 words. "Your treat this time." And just like that, she went. It should have ended there. A simple exchange, a momentary thrill. But there was something effortless about Matthew, something unguarded in the way he looked at her, like she was a person and not a prize. He asked about her designs, not the labels she wore. He listened, really listened, his eyes warm with something that felt dangerously close to understanding. She started to crave it. The ease. The way he made her laugh without effort. How he never once made her feel like she was being inspected, measured. The way, for the first time in a long time, she felt seen. But secrets have weight, and hers grew heavier by the day. She never spoke of Kelvin. Never mentioned the name that ruled her world, the hands that had built the gilded cage she lived in. She told herself it was harmless. A small rebellion. A whisper of something real in a life that had become scripted. Until Kelvin started asking questions. It was always subtle. A passing comment about where she had been, a glance that lingered a second too long. He never accused, never demanded. He never needed to. Kelvin had a way of making silence feel like a noose. And Martha knew, without being told, that he was watching. He always was. The truth finally unraveled at the worst possible moment. She had been standing in a grand ballroom, surrounded by wealth and power, her hand resting lightly in Kelvin's. She had worn the dress he had chosen, the earrings he had gifted, played the part he had written for her. And then, Matthew. Kelvin's voice was smooth when he spoke, measured as ever. "Ah, you two have met." Martha's heart stopped. She saw it then, the way Matthew's easy grin faltered, the way his eyes flicked between her and the man beside her. And just like that, everything collapsed. Kelvin turned to her, his smile untouched, his grip on her hand just a fraction tighter. "Careful, darling," he murmured, so soft that only she could hear. "Atlanta's a small city, and I can erase you from it." It was not a threat. Not exactly. It was a fact. A reminder. And just like that, the walls of her world closed in. Matthew had always trusted his father. Respected him. Believed in the man who had built an empire from nothing. But now, that foundation, the very ground he stood on, felt unsteady beneath his feet. Kelvin never raised his voice. He didn't need to. His words carried a weight far heavier than anger. "You think you know her?" he asked one evening, swirling the last of his scotch in a crystal glass. "You think you've found something real?" He exhaled, a slow, deliberate breath, eyes shadowed with disappointment. "I've seen her kind before, son. Beautiful. Charming. Always saying the right thing. But beneath it? They take. They always take." Matthew frowned, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. "Martha isn't like that." The words came out firmer than he expected, but Kelvin only chuckled, low and knowing. "You're young," his father murmured. "You haven't seen what I've seen." A pause. A sip. Then, softer, with the precision of a knife slipping between ribs, "You know, your mother trusted people like her, too." The air in the room changed. The name of his mother was not spoken lightly. Not since the day she had been taken away, eyes vacant, mind lost to a world no one could reach. Kelvin sighed, setting his glass down with careful precision. She let someone in. Let them whisper things, twist her mind. And look where that got her. His gaze lifted, locking onto Matthew's. "I won't watch you go down that road. Not for some girl who knows exactly how to play you." Doubt. That was the trick, wasn't it? A seed planted in the right place, left to take root. Matthew wanted to push it away, but it clung to him. Hadn't Martha been secretive? Hadn't she hesitated when he asked about her past? And hadn't she, somehow, been tangled up with his father all along? Martha, meanwhile, had already begun to understand the kind of man she was truly dealing with. She tried to run. Packed a bag, grabbed her keys. But when she reached the door of her apartment, the lock wouldn't turn. She tried again. Nothing. A phone call later, her landlord spoke in clipped, uncomfortable tones. "I'm sorry, Miss Jennings. But, well, your lease is in Mr. Blackstone's name. There's nothing I can do." Her stomach twisted. She hadn't known that. Hadn't thought to ask. She checked her bank account next. 0. Every penny gone. Panic pressed against her ribs. Kelvin had done this. Of course, he had. She had never been free. She had only been allowed to believe she was. That night, with nowhere to go, with fear settling into her bones like an old sickness, she made a choice. A dangerous, desperate choice. Kelvin's study had always been locked. She had seen it in glimpses, the grand mahogany desk, the shelves lined with books that had never been touched. And the drawer. Always locked. Always off limits. It took time, patience, and a bobby pin she had once seen in a spy movie. When the lock clicked open, relief washed over her. Then she saw what lay inside. A folder. Thin, unassuming. Her name printed neatly across the tab. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside, she found pieces of her life she had never given him. Copies of old documents, records of places she had visited. Photos of her, some from years ago, taken from a distance. And then, beneath those, the articles. Different names. Different women. Each of them once connected to Kelvin Blackstone. Each of them vanished. No bodies. No explanations. Just, gone. Her breath came in shallow, uneven gasps. This was more than control. More than possession. This was something else entirely. Martha had always known how to hold her own. She wasn't the type to bow her head, to walk away in silence. And she certainly wasn't the type to let a man like Kelvin Blackstone decide the course of her life. Not anymore. So, she went to him. The house was quiet when she arrived. Too quiet. No distant murmur of the staff, no faint sound of classical music playing from the study. Just silence, thick and waiting, like the hush before a storm. She found him in the sitting room, lounging in his usual chair, a glass of something dark in his hand. His expression didn't change when he saw her, but there was something in his eyes, something unreadable, something watching. "I want out," she said. The words cut through the stillness, sharp and unwavering. Kelvin took his time. He swirled the liquid in his glass, let out a small, knowing sigh. "Now, why would you go and say something like that?" His voice was gentle. Almost amused. Martha's hands curled into fists. "You don't own me." A slow smile crept onto his lips, one that never reached his eyes. "No, sweetheart. I take care of you. There's a difference." She took a step forward, refusing to be swallowed by his presence. "I've seen the files. I know what you've done to the others. You think I won't fight back?" Kelvin watched her, expression unreadable. Then, with the kind of ease that made her stomach turn, he reached for her coat. Adjusted the collar as if she were a child about to step into the cold. "Let's not be rash," he murmured. "You're safe, with me." A shiver ran down her spine, not from his touch but from the certainty in his voice. Safe. The word rang in her ears, mocking her. She turned to leave, but before she could take a single step, his hand closed around her wrist. Firm. Unyielding. And then she knew. She wasn't leaving this house. Not alive. Panic clawed its way up her throat, but she pushed it down. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of fear. With all the strength she had, she twisted free, her nails raking against his skin. He barely flinched. The struggle was fast, brutal. She fought like hell, but Kelvin was stronger. Always had been. His grip locked around her throat, forcing her back, pressing her down. The edges of her vision blurred. Her lungs burned. Somewhere in the chaos, something hit the floor. A dull thud. Her phone. Face down. The screen still glowing. Still recording. Her fingers reached for it, desperate, but darkness closed in, swallowing everything. And just like that, Martha Jennings disappeared. The next morning, before the city had fully woken, a body was left in Piedmont Park. Neatly placed. As if it had never belonged to a person at all. This was never about love. Never about heartbreak or betrayal. It wasn't even about Martha, not really. This was about power. The kind of power that doesn't just control a person but swallows them whole, erasing every trace of who they were. Kelvin Blackstone understood that kind of power. He wielded it like a sharpened blade, cutting down anything that threatened the world he had built. Martha had tried to fight. She had tried to leave. And for that, she had become nothing more than another name, another whisper in a city that had learned to look the other way. Atlanta had always been kind to men like Kelvin, the ones who moved in expensive suits and left destruction in their wake without ever dirtying their hands. He had been careful. He had been precise. But even the most careful men make mistakes. The phone had been recording. A small, blinking light in the dark. A silent witness to the last moments of a woman who refused to be forgotten. It had captured his voice, his threats, the final struggle. Evidence. The one thing he had always made sure never to leave behind. And now, it was out there, waiting. For years, people had whispered about the women who disappeared. The ones who had entered Kelvin Blackstone's orbit and never left. Wealth had a way of covering things up, of turning tragedies into unfortunate coincidences. But Martha? She had been different. She had left behind something more than just a name. And now, there were questions. Whispers growing louder. Because maybe Martha Jennings wasn't the first. And maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't be the last. If you found this story important, share it. Let more people see what really happens. And if you want to hear more true crime cases like this, hit that subscribe button. There are more stories out there, some waiting to be told, others still unfolding. This was Vic's Crime Stories. See you next time.